Thanks so much for joining us on Facebook Live. Lindsay Thies with 3 News Now here alongside Megan Stewart. And we have 2 very special guests with us tonight. We have Andrew Easton with District 66 Westside Schools, and we have Wendy Lowenstein with Omaha Public Schools' very first virtual school. Really exciting. For those of you guys who have been tuning into this Omaha 2025 series, you already know what it's about. We're talking about education today. But Megan, why don't you kind of catch people up if they're not following the series?
Yeah, absolutely. So our Omaha 2025, like Lindsay was saying, is our way to look into what the city will look like by 2025, and that's development, that's with education, that's arts and culture in the city, technology, how will technology change the city. So really kind of a very broad topic that we've kind of broken up into these subjects that we find have a lot of stakeholders here in Omaha. So yesterday I did a piece that aired at 10 o'clock about development. How will development change the landscape of Omaha, pushing west versus redeveloping our urban core, and the pros and cons of both of that, and the push and pull that's happening from a lot of different people in that arena. And so today, like Lindsay was saying, education, this is her piece, so
yeah.
I'll let you talk now.
Yeah, well, and even before we get into talking about education and what the next 8 years might look like, a lot of people said, well, why did you pick 2025? Did you just throw out an arbitrary number? And I think it's especially pertinent when we start thinking about education, because 8 years is, you know, a student going in as a freshman in high school and then graduating from college. When we start to think about broadly what the next 8 years could look like for education, Wendy, Andrew, you know, what kind of comes to mind for you guys?
Yeah, I guess I would sort of start off by saying some of the things that we are trying to make a priority at present in the District 66 is for students to just really have an opportunity to kind of be in charge of making, I would say, more like academic decisions in the midst of the classroom like day and over the course of a unit. And so something that we've started to value is personalized learning, which is something that has been implemented district-wide for about 3 years now, where students might come into my English class and they'll set a daily goal for themselves and have about 4 or 5 tasks that they can pick from, that they have a duration of time to try to tackle, I guess. And so they sort of will dictate then each day what they do and how much time they'll allocate to each of those tasks. And so it ends up looking a little bit more, I think, like we experience in our jobs, right? You have long-term deadlines.
Right.
You have to set and kind of manage your time in pieces kind of leading up to that, and you give more time to the stuff that needs it. And you can build that way in around your day and your calendar. So if you have a baseball game on Tuesday night, man, if I got a homework assignment Tuesday and I have to get that back to my teacher on Wednesday, that's tough, because students sometimes have a pretty big
busy schedule
workload
these days, yeah.
So if they're given the opportunity to kind of manage their life in that regard, I think that's something that transcends the content area. And so it's pretty cool to extend those learning opportunities to students.
Definitely. Wendy, you're the principal for Omaha's, and really the state's first virtual school. We actually kind of feature the virtual school a little bit in the story. Watch it tonight at 10. Plug there. But tell us a little bit about when you think, Omaha 2025, what education might look like then.
Well, really, I think all of our districts in Omaha are trying to answer that question and create an environment right now where we can prepare our students for the future. In Omaha Virtual School, we really try to replicate that, where our students can find success regardless of college or career they choose and what path they choose, to make sure that, similar to in District 66, putting the learners in the driver's seat, but then also empowering parents to be a significant part of that role, and even engaging parents to the point of being close to a co-teacher or a partner in that education. Oftentimes, in a traditional model, parents feel left out or awkward or don't know where they fit.
Right.
And
it's on the teacher, the educator, in that teacher-student relationship. Where do the parents fit in?
And really, the world is our school, is our teachers and our schools and our students. That's where we learn from. So
right.
How can we bring parents to the table and have them engage and feel more empowered in that education environment, to keep that student at the center, but also make sure that it's a community-wide effort and not just on the teacher and student. So that's something that we really we really look for in our school community is high parent involvement, especially since some of the work, the schoolwork and the curriculum is done at home. The parents don't have a choice, and it's been a great opportunity as a school leader to work with parents and educate parents. So not only am I thinking about what that instructional model is for our students, but I'm looking at professional development and instructional models for my teachers, and then we're also thinking about professional development and instructional models for adult learners in the form of parents who come from a variety of different backgrounds, a variety of different age ranges, to make sure that they feel equipped as a partner in their students' education.
Really quick, if you guys are joining us on Facebook, we are taking questions, so feel free, whether it's a question for Megan or myself about the series, or if you want to talk education and pick, Andrew's brain or Wendy's brain, that is what we're here for. So, another thing is we started to, dig into all of these topics, whether it was development or education or technology, there was a lot of crossover.
Yes.
And it seems like, whether we're talking about development and, a possible school being built in Northwest Omaha for high school or technology, you can't, they all work together. How does technology itself really kind of start to influence the way that teachers will teach in, the next 8 years?
Yeah, that's something that, sort of has driven our process up to this point, and to kind of start very formally with it. I know, about 2 years ago, I put in a garbage disposal at my house, and I'm not the handiest of people.
Okay.
But, the process is very similar because of technology, I think, to what we can try to model in the classroom is that, I went out and got writing materials, the instructions that came with the garbage disposal that I purchased, and I got online and watched YouTube videos, and when I got stuck, I called one of my friends who, was sort of maybe your master mentor, in that regard, and I got it in, it runs, so that's
what
great.
Would we have done before YouTube videos, right?
and I think, though, that process is something that today's learners need to learn how to access and to use.
Right.
And because it amazes me sometimes when students will ask questions when they have a phone or a computer in front of them that could take care of that.
Right.
Where I feel like as a teacher, I want to be more of that, lifeline, right? That comes alongside the students and helps collaborate with them, focusing more on creativity and innovation than necessarily being the receptacle of knowledge at the front that's supposed to. Because I think technology's changed that.
Definitely. How important, Wendy, is teaching some of these skills like problem solving or figuring it out yourself, like Andrew was saying, versus just here's the answer. There you go.
Well, and I really like Andrew's example because education has shifted in that students no longer, an emphasis doesn't need to be on rote memorization and what they need to know because Google is that for us. We have those supports in place. It's more important for students to be able to do based on what tools they have available to them, and then how to be active contributors to our society based on their passions and leveraging all those tools that are around them. So the one big shift that technology should make in the lives of our students is students should be seeing technology as an educational tool, not necessarily entertainment. Right now, when younger kiddos especially, they see it as entertainment for games and apps and watching YouTube,
it's playing video games,
which is it's great, and they know that that has the potential, that the internet has that potential, but also how can we use that to learn when we do have a need? Because very quickly, and myself included as a parent and also as a teacher and a principal, sometimes as adults we're quick to give that answer, right?
Yeah.
But instead being able to be the guide on the side and say, this is what you have around you, figure out a solution, and if that solution doesn't work that you've determined and you fail, it's okay. You need to try again. Let's go back to these resources. And really what we call that is growth mindset and just knowing how to fail forward. And being very, very open to the positives around failure, because as adults, I think it's hard for us to admit when we fail.
Yeah.
And we have to model, hey, this didn't work out for me today. And so I'm going to sit down tonight and I'm going to reflect on what I could have done differently, and I'm going to get up tomorrow and I'm going to try again. Because oftentimes what I'm finding in our students, and even myself sometimes as an adult, is that we have that instant gratification. We want to fix, we want a solution, we want it
totally.
now.
Yeah.
And so that information now all the time readily available also kind of shifts our mindset into thinking that, well, I should be able to find an answer, and I should be able to find it now, which means in a Google search, we always pick the first one, right?
Right.
Which is typically paid for.
Right.
So, so that's how our learning is shifting a little bit, and how our teaching and learning environment is shifting, is because answers don't always come easy. But that's what we want.
Yeah.
So.
We actually have some questions that are starting to roll in on Facebook. So, yeah, do you want to take one?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so here's a comment from Anthony. I'm going to pronounce your last name wrong. Weedy. He had a comment. He said, I think we need to go back to school books and notes off projectors, not electronic. Going forward, as all these new sorts of devices are introduced into schools, is there a pushback from people that didn't grow up with that sort of technology, maybe don't understand its value?
We still need handwriting,
exactly.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you know, cursive, things like that. I mean, is there pushback from, you know, back in my day, we didn't have that stuff? Not that I'm making fun of you, Anthony.
Yes.
I'm just making a point.
Some of us handwrite our notes still. Yeah.
I would totally validate actually Anthony's voice in that conversation. Thanks for asking that question. That's something that whenever I sort of started to personalize, I said to myself, you know, I'd love for there to be video content for students to access on demand, and that materials will be available online, and they could ask questions in class, and if I'm not tied to the front, then I can be there to, you know, answer questions on the fly. And what I found was that, you know, some students still prefer to read from a hard copy. And so one of the options that we have built in addition to the video, is to read from hard copy. And then I had some students that also said, you know, I prefer to be lectured to, which was not what I had necessarily anticipated to begin with.
How old are these kids that we're talking?
14, right?
Really? What? Okay.
And what's amazing is that students over the course of kind of us refining this process, which is a pretty new frontier in education, I feel like, have, by allowing them to have a voice, they can kind of drive that process.
Okay.
And so what it looks like really is for those things to come alongside one another rather than one replacing the other piece. So I think there is a place for that, and that's a really great question.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think when we talk about differentiating and meeting students where their learning preferences are, and figuring out what's best for them and helping students figure out what they do prefer, you need to expose them to a variety of different ways of learning. And so they are, by the time they're 14, you know, in 9th grade, they know what they prefer. They are aware of, I can learn online, I can learn audio, through audio, I can learn visually, I can learn kinesthetically, copying, pasting, moving things around. Those are options, but this is what I prefer. And for me, and just in my educational experience, I didn't really learn my learning preferences until I was in college, when I was alone to my own devices. Yep. And so by having these conversations early on with students and exposing them to a variety of different ways to learn, then the goal is for our students to be independent and figure out, and then being able to take advantage of those options. So there is I'm a former librarian, so I never want to see books go away. But we should always, in our educational practices, provide options. So have a kiddo be able to cut and paste and make a collage out of magazine clippings, right? That's one of my favorite pastimes. Or they can use digital images, of course, if they're citing their images properly, but they can make that collage digitally, or they can draw if they want to. So we still need to provide variety, but we'd be doing a disservice if we only provided one way.
I think one of the things too, if folks aren't familiar with the virtual school, the way that it works is they go to the students that are involved go to the DoSpace for classes a couple times a week, and then they work from home the other days of the week. So when we're talking virtual school, it isn't everything on the computer. Right. They're still, you know, getting those tactile skills and things like that.
Absolutely. Our Omaha Virtual School, we use a blended learning environment. So students are required to come face-to-face to the DoSpace at the MCC at DoSpace location on 72nd and Dodge. So Metropolitan Community College graciously hosts us. And we really believe that, and research also shows that the blended learning environment is really what meets students' needs. All virtual, all online doesn't meet those socio-emotional needs that students need at, well, all ages, even adults, in order to make learning a truly collaborative and engaging endeavor. So we do meet face-to-face, but then a significant amount of the coursework is done at home with their learning coach or their parent to guide them through. But we also do regular online lessons where our teachers teach lessons online and students engage and interact online. So their students are not only learning how to engage face-to-face with collaborative projects, but they are also learning how to engage online in a very similar webinar type scenario. So imagine a kindergartner participating in a webinar with other kindergartners and first graders, and our very talented kindergarten first grade teacher is teaching them how to do that, and then also engaging them in content. So if you think about a kindergartner engaging in a webinar, and then you think about the potential that we have to go from there, is pretty significant.
Well, I'm thinking about how that might impact, school districts in more rural parts of the state, that might not have access to some of the educators, some of the programs, some of the things that are here.
Or even their facilities might be aging.
Right. Yeah.
Definitely.
For those of you who are just joining us on Facebook Live, first, thanks. Hello. Happy Wednesday. My name's Lindsay. I'm with 3 News Now, and Megan Stewart. The two of us have been working on a series of stories called Omaha 2025, where we're digging into what the future of our community would look like. We're also kind of expanding our coverage with these Facebook Live chats. So Andrew Easton with District 66 is joining us. Wendy Lowenstein with OPS's virtual school, digital school?
Omaha Virtual School.
Omaha Virtual School. They're also, it's so digitally involved. I keep throwing the wrong order in there. So we have another Facebook question. This one is from Debbie Lynn. She asks, do you foresee each student of every ability and level eventually having their own IEP, individual education plan?
Can I start with that one?
Yeah, please do.
Yes, absolutely. And and I know District 66 is really moving towards that with personalization, and that's something that we're looking at and starting in the fall is having the individualized education plans for all of our students, so students can let us know what their preferences are, their interests are, to share that with our teachers, but then also we can have regular communication with goal setting and preferences as we teach them how to learn from videos or audio and whatnot. So they can share with us their preferences, but then also using that for goal setting and determining where they want to go in that school year. So again, putting the student in the driver's seat, but making it more personalized. And so whenever we have conversations with that student, with that family, we go back to that plan and say, okay, it looks like we've hit a speed bump with multiplication. So our goal in math may not be met because we need to continue to support some skills with multiplication, because why do we move you on to division if we haven't mastered multiplication? Right. And so have those regular communications to really personalize that education for students.
And if someone's watching and they don't know what an individual education plan is, I mean, the amount of work that a teacher puts into even just one IEP, I mean, we're talking hours upon hours. As far as how, when we look at technology and data collection, how might technology help, Andrew, you with your IEPs for your students in the future?
Yeah, that's something, so next year in District 66, I'm going to be a personalized learning coordinator for the district. And in that role, one thing that we're talking about this summer is creating a portfolio that would look similar to what we're talking about here.
Okay.
And I think you brought up a really good point too, I think typically when we think IEP, we think that there's test scores and there's all these numbers and facts in there, but I think these documents need to be functional for students, and I think that we need to build them so that students can access those in a way that we typically think teachers would. And we still would use those as resources as educators in the classroom, but it really needs to be more of a piece where when it comes to brainstorming, a student be able to access their own file and go, okay, let's just kind of get grounded in the things that I'm good at and the things that I have a passion for. And we're in the process, too, of starting to just kind of sift through what might be a pretty authentic way to help people with their own creativity type. So they could sort of learn a little bit about what might help them in their process towards creating a new thing, a new piece for themselves. And so we're going to make it a little bit of a survey almost so that they can get, I don't know, just a plan in there and a reference piece that will be something that they access as much as the teachers do. That should allow them when differentiation is possible. You know, you can kind of do your own thing. A lot of students will just go, well, that's not what I've done in my education up to this point. You tell me what to do, and I just do that.
Right.
So where do I start? And that'll be a
just
great place to build from.
This is all just so fascinating too, because I mean, granted, it's been quite a while since we were in, you know, high school and grade school, but I mean, I feel like we learned such a different way growing up. So do you have to just completely turn your brain around and when you start tackling some of these topics and thinking about, you know, how to move forward?
I jumped in before the last time, but I think it's a shift for everything, because even education is the one career, the one field that every single one of us has experienced, right? So we all have a frame of reference,
right?
And so the struggle is that it is a shift, but it's truly what's best for students, because education isn't about me, it's not about you, it's not about the parent, it's about what's best for the student. And so most educators know that. That's why we're in this profession. But it's a shift in even thinking about helping parents understand, well, why are you letting him set goals? Like, that's your job, right? So it is a shift, and it's a community-wide shift, and making sure that parents truly understand, yes, our students are setting the goals, but you are still a significant part. The teacher is still a significant part. We're not just having little Johnny set his own goals and send him on his way. So it's a shift in thinking, but it's what's best for students, and putting them at the center.
Definitely. There was just part of an article that came out today in the New York Times that talked about some of the investment that Omaha Public School is making with buying more and more Microsoft products to put into the schools. Just as District 66, I know we've done some stories there with all sorts of stuff, Skype in the classroom, Apple laptops, that type of thing. When we talk about just like the hardware, whether that's virtual reality, augmented reality glasses, Skype, smart boards, what might be some tools that we'll be seeing in the classrooms in the future?
Yeah, I know that there's been a lot of talk recently, at least in the stuff that I've been like reading and kind of nerdily being in on Voxer and Twitter chats and things like that.
Redditing, all that stuff.
About kind of that augmented reality and virtual reality, and I think there's a place for that. I really like it with regards to kind of like your science labs, where you're able to actually like, you know, manipulate an organ, right, and be able to deconstruct it without actually, because I think that if you get the right program and stuff, that obviously is maybe faster. This is gross. Faster cleanup,
right?
And just you don't have to have the same like resources.
Definitely.
I'll be curious to see where that evolves, particularly in an English classroom. That's something that I've looked into quite a bit as of late. But I know that they'll go on virtual tours of places, and at the elementary level, I got to go on a Google expedition over the summer at a conference in Denver where, you know, the teacher, I'm looking around at it, with just, you know, a phone, like it's in one of those devices.
With like the VR glasses.
At the coral reef, and the teacher from the tablet could direct where my attention needed to go, and the teacher on her pad was able to see where every student was looking too. So, you know, you can't just
that's wild that like the teacher can follow up with them.
So it would track like where Johnny's view is, right?
That way Johnny isn't sleeping with the glasses on. Poor Johnny. We're giving Johnny the run through.
He's having fun. So, you know, I think that it'll be interesting to see where some of those innovations take us. But it takes time. You know, it's like you said a moment ago, it's not about, the technology isn't what drives best practices. It's best practices just need to allow technology to come alongside those in ways that they haven't been able to be supported before.
Well, when I think of like the virtual school, that probably didn't come to be overnight.
No, it didn't. And, you know, Nebraska, we're somewhat new in that realm. There are a lot of states that are working through virtual schools. Nebraska is one of 7 states who wasn't using virtual schools for K-8 students. And so we're not behind. I feel like we have a lot to learn from what other states and where they've gone wrong, per se, and what they've gone right. But making sure that we're providing some some educational opportunities for our students to make sure we're preparing them for their future world. And when you look at even, I believe there's 5 or 6 states that require that students take an online class for a graduation requirement, which only makes sense because then you look at how many online offerings, whether they're all online or blended at higher education, and even you look at college and career readiness, you look at the community colleges, you look at even continuing education for cosmetologists or mechanics or HVAC, regardless of what your career is going to be, you're going to have to know how to leverage the internet for educational purposes. So why wouldn't we in K-12 or pre-K-12 start leveraging online environments more and more and more as educational outlets for our students to learn. I know we're doing that, but even expanding it more in our state to make sure that our students are ready.
How long does it take for a virtual school to go from idea into existence? Like 8 years, a couple years?
You're just talking
Logging onto Google, you know?
Well, you know, we were lucky enough in Omaha Public Schools that Superintendent Evans and the Director of IMS, Rob Dixon, had some experience in starting a virtual school in Andover, Kansas. So they were really,
They fast-tracked it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, they helped a lot. And so, you know, I started in May of last year, and we worked through the summer to develop this concept. But that Mr. Dixon and Mr. Evans had been thinking and planning and working on this since before that. So, and it's one of those things where we need to be rapidly evolving and changing to meet our students' needs and the changing technology. So at no point will we ever be stagnant. We constantly need to be evolving and changing to meet our students' needs. And the same thing goes for just the district as a whole and the city as a whole.
We got the questions
Yeah,
rolling in now on
jump
Facebook,
in now. We've got
so we got
questions.
some.
So we have one from Abigail Burke. How might you or how are educating parents and other stakeholders in understanding the importance of digital literacies? Did I say that right?
How are you guys educating parents or other stakeholders to understand why digital literacy is so important?
And I assume that means incorporating digital practices into the classroom.
I can, so we have, Ms. Keegan Korf is the regional lead for Common Sense Education, and she is housed in Omaha Public Schools. And so we do a lot with teaching our parents and our students about digital citizenship. And that ranges from cyberbullying to how to write a proper email to even properly citing resources, research. It runs the gamut, right? Even just terms of use. So looking at what the age limits, even just in looking at protecting our students when they're making accounts online with FERPA and COPA. So we do a lot in that realm in our district as a whole, but of course being in a virtual school, that's something that's built throughout our curriculum, so our students are aware. But then also, you know, we just finished a series with our parents and we talked about exactly that, cyberbullying, social media, and so we can keep our parents up on, well, try our best to keep parents up on what students are on and what to look for. And even just managing internet use at home. So it's imperative that districts and teachers and district leaders really keep that at the forefront because that's the world we live in today.
I have a question. Is the level of parent involvement in education, is that something that's always been there, or is this kind of something that's
even
new?
more important with, you know, all of the, sometimes I hate to say dangers, but sometimes some of the stuff that can come along with being online?
I would imagine as a parent that it's a little bit overwhelming at this point because there are so many avenues is what I hear sometimes between text messages and email alerts,
Snapchat,
and
Facebook,
that you can get on Twitter and follow what's going on with the game, but there's also like multiple Twitter sites at any given high school, you know, and so I think that what I'm starting to at least sense a little bit is it's starting to streamline because there was a time where I think a lot of different teachers were using a lot of different platforms to post homework assignments, and it was really difficult even for students to navigate.
Oh, wow.
Which side are we on for this class in the 7 that I have right now? So I do think that there's something to that, but I have noticed too that districts, as you were talking about, are starting to build in parent opportunities over the course of the year to come in and learn the different platforms on which some of this information is being distributed. And from parent involvement, well, I think parents have always really cared and wanted to be involved. And there's just a lot of different avenues now with which they have those opportunities.
And a lot of it does come with the parent education piece. Not saying that every parent needs to be on everything, but being aware of what your student is on and making sure that you are working to protect your child. And I do see that as a role that public schools need to take on is parent education to help them stay on top of what should and should not be happening at home. Like Facebook, you have to be 13 to be on Facebook, so something to keep in mind, and there's a reason for that. Who else would a parent turn to for help on that? commonsenseeducation.org, of course, but then we have a role as educators to educate our parents.
Do we have any? I think we got. Oh my gosh, they're coming in. We're going to get to all the questions, guys.
We do have a question, and I think you guys might want to respond to this. So Bonnie Bogard says, grown adults make 2 to 3 and sometimes 4 career changes, yet you're expecting kids to set their own goals for their educational future, which sets the foundation for their professional future. So how would you want to respond to that?
Yeah, Bonnie, I think it's a great question, and it's one where I think that in the simplest form I would say that we want to focus on in the classroom is about the process more than the product. And I think that as you start to learn process and you learn your own process for how you work through things, and you learn about the process for whether it's still writing or mathematics or skills that do just in terms of what your brain has to do, work through those, have always had an applicability to the workplace. But what I'd really like to see, and I feel like we're headed in that direction, is for us to have a little bit more, whether you call it a CBL or a PBL or these different problem-based learning situations where you can actually get into real-world scenarios to kind of extend what you're learning in the classroom.
Like, do you really understand versus, like we were saying before, just have kind of a memorized set response?
Yeah, and I've seen students design community outreach projects to try to have an impact, where they have to contact businesses. I know our marketing program at this school has teamed up with Dunkin' Donuts is one, so I'll give them a plug because they've worked really well.
With like the DECA students.
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
did a story about that. You can find that on our education
Fantastic.
tab.
So, and I got to sit in on one of those classrooms and hear our students, just grill the owner, Chris Brown, on this back and forth. It was really interactive. And so, but that's authentic, and I think, in the midst of all this digital, we just think we're going to get lost in the screens. I think that ultimately, that's for facilitating information, but that authentic piece needs to be there. And I like where we're kind of headed in that regard.
Yeah, and I will say too, yes, we're having students set goals, and yes, we want them to pursue their passions, but within the realm of, reading, writing, arithmetic, right? Right. So if we're talking about, oh gosh, of course I have to come up with an example and I'm drawing a blank. But if we're talking about entrepreneurship and economics and how does that work? Well, then students will create a business, and a business of their choice. So if they are into jewelry, then make jewelry, sell your jewelry. How does that work with taxes? How are you going to promote? How are you going to persuade the bank for a loan? How are you going to persuade your consumers to purchase? So when we talk about goal setting and we talk about students pursuing their passions, we're still engaging them in the standards and the skills that are set by the state, but that are determined by a group of educators. That is what our students need to know before they graduate. So really it's a shift in the application, how those skills are being applied by our students. Instead of it being a multiple choice test at the end of the chapter, students are expected to show their knowledge at a deeper level, engaged in a content or applied to an area in which they're truly passionate about. And they might find that, for example, in our school, all students K through 8 take Intro to Computer Programming, all of our students. So they get, they learn about what computer programming is, which a lot of students think, I want to make video games, and this is great. Like, what middle schooler doesn't want to make a video game?
Totally.
But once they get into the meat and potatoes of it, and they're coding, and they're like, whoa, this is another language, this is really hard, I'm not passionate about this. But the part of video gaming that I really like is art. I'm an artist, so my shift wouldn't be I want to make a video game. Maybe my shift shift, my focus should be on graphic design that would then partner with somebody who can write some crazy code to make my graphics come to life. So we are still requiring them to work through the requirements, but in a method that they're more engaged in.
Well, kind of going back to what you were both saying earlier about how failure is so important. And, you know, kind of addressing, was it Bonnie's question about how, you know, as adults where we change careers, you know, like when these kids decide, using Johnny as an example.
Yeah, good old Johnny.
Good old Johnny with, you know, maybe he doesn't like coding and likes design. Like, how important is it teaching those kids that, like, failure is part of the process and it's not a bad thing, and that's, how much does that play into steering, you know, their educational career?
That's something that even in the learner profiles that we're looking to put together, that we'd like to track when students have the ability to do things, you know, demonstrate understanding whatever way that you would like. That if Johnny every time, poor Johnny, does like the same thing, the student's not learning, right? Because your process is the same, and you can refine that over time and learn incrementally. But we'd like to keep a record of those endeavors as well, so that, you know, if you wrote a song the first time, that maybe your next challenge is to you know, put a music video together so you can learn the video piece, which is, I think, goes a little bit along the lines of what you were just talking about. With, you know, maybe you love art, but you don't realize that graphic design is art just using a computer. And so by I don't know, just promoting those and giving students the room to explore those different avenues and support them. But it does ask a lot of the teachers too, because you have to be a little bit of a jack of all trades.
Everything. Yeah.
Well, or access people
or have the guy who can help you with the garbage disposal. Help you when you need to teach that in class.
And that's what we actually, because we just we went through a book by Emily Bazelon. She writes for New York Times, and we read through her book, and then I got in touch with her on Twitter, and we had a prompt over author's purpose, and she Skyped in for 200 students, and they came up and asked her questions. So just that opportunity, if you're going to write on the topic about authors, let's talk to the author for a little bit. And things that, I don't know, again, just to get back to that authentic piece, let's talk process. And just learn about how we can learn best and function best for the careers that don't even exist yet.
Definitely.
Awesome. Kidding. Just as far as you are representing two school districts of different sizes, is it easier to implement something like an individualized education plan for a smaller district where there's fewer students, or maybe a bigger one where there's potentially more resources?
Yeah. Well, see, in our school still is remotely small, and so we are going to work to make it manageable. Really, the facilitation of that, and we're calling it individualized learning plan, but really making that be a relationship piece between the teacher, the student, and the parent. And so it will be facilitated between those three parties, but we will, as a school, work together as a community to figure out, this is our baseline, this is kind of what we have an idea to put into our individualized learning plan, but how can we add to it and make it even better, so it's something that follows the student every single year, and make it meaningful for the students. So I feel like implementation is always what that's the struggle, and making sure that we keep the students at the forefront, make it manageable, and make it meaningful. And then from there, it can grow and expand, so long as we have those basics. So I think implementation would be difficult, and some teachers are like, holy cow, how would I manage this? When I think about a high school teacher, I'm a former high school English teacher, and I had 130 students, right? Just that was my load. So that would be difficult to manage. But I think where the problem lies is that the teachers and administration feel like it's something we have to manage. So it's something that should live and breathe with the student in communication with those teachers. So some of it is just giving up some control. You know.
I think you're spot on with all that, and that's what, because right now I want to say around 140 students that I have in my English classes, and it's just not feasible. I feel like for that many teachers to be able to have that intimate of knowledge of all the inner workings of the individual. But if you have that piece that can follow from year to year, which is where I think some of that information gets lost sometimes. And if the student is really the one responsible for that, which ultimately they need to, they need to be able to articulate, and express to other people like, hey, I'm going to need this kind of condition for me to optimize what I'm able to do today. And I love it, even in terms of like the space. I have students that'll, because we have a flexible learning environment, I had one 14-year-old, write in his reflection at the end of the unit, I started off sitting with all my friends, and I didn't really get a whole lot done. And then I moved to with one of my friends, and that went okay. But then when I sat by myself and put my phone away, I was very productive.
I got my work done.
Yeah, not a surprise, but for a 14-year-old to admit that, right? And say, like,
some adults are still working on that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Myself included.
Guilty as charged.
So, but it's just cool that, again, instead of in college, that we're having these conversations as freshmen. And it's just encouraging for where it'll head in 2025.
Definitely. How are we doing on questions?
I think we're good. Yeah,
Awesome.
I think we covered everybody.
Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in on Facebook Live. We're going to post this entire chat in its enormity.
Yeah, we're going on 40 minutes.
That's awesome.
Wow.
You were like double from yesterday. So
time flies when you're having
fun.
And you're having a good
go all night.
conversation.
As teachers, we're just chatting.
Definitely, right? So tune in tonight, 10 o'clock, Omaha 2025 Education is going to air on 3 News Now. You can also check it out online right now on 3newsnow.com. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, while we're sitting here, we're talking about education, 3 News Now has an education initiative that we do every Tuesday, every Thursday, called In the Classroom. We've done several stories at Westside. We were at the virtual school when they first opened, kind of taking a look and digging deeper about some of the programs in the classroom. If you are really enjoying the 2025 conversation, we will be back here tomorrow night talking arts and culture. So thank you guys again so much. Andrew Easton, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Wendy Lowenstein, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It was fun.
All right. Have a good night, you guys. See ya.
Thank you.
See ya.